Today, I want to talk a little bit about the topic of rewarding and why not rewarding might actually sometimes be the best reward for your horse. So, after I had my conversation with my friend Dr. Steve Peters a few weeks ago, there was a lot of feedback coming in after that conversation and many questions about, well, how do I reward my horse in the best way? And I was thinking I'd hop on here today, make a video, and just point out of some aspects which I personally find very important to think about when thinking about this whole topic of learning and rewarding. So let's dive in. We need to think about our brain as a living organism. So our brain is shaped throughout our whole life by the experiences we are having, by past experience, by experiences we are making right now, and so on. So whenever we learn something, consciously, unconsciously, we have neuronal pathways which form in our brains, and if we repeat them, they get better connected. Most of us heard this sentence, what fires together wires together in the brain, and I'm going to explain what that means. And the important thing is to imagine that the brain is permanently processing loads and loads of information coming in from our senses and of our environment, what we hear, what we see, what's happening as well inside of the body, which we're not even talking about here. So all these things, our brain is permanently having an input of tons of stimuli it has to process, and it has to kind of make choices for our best survival, for our health, and all these things. So when we are thinking of learning, let's say targeted learning, so learning where we really focus on a certain thing, a certain task, a certain problem, we want to find a solution for, and so on. So like the type of learning we have very often with our horses. We want to teach them something new, or we want to let them figure out a new task, and so on. So what actually happens is when our horse, let's stick to the horse, is in front of a task, gets a little bit aroused, it doesn't know what to do, and then there is a moment where it figures out a solution. The moment the horse figures out the solution, the right answer, in general, we take off a cue, or however we are training our horse, if we let it find the solution by itself, it's going to come back from a little bit a more aroused state into a more back to homeostasis, more relaxed state. So what happens in the brain at that moment is that new neurons, when you learn something new, neurons which did not fire together before, fire together now. So to create a long-lasting learning experience, we want those neuronal pathways to become not just little pathways, but we want them to become high-speed highways. So that actually, you remember maybe when you learned driving a car, in the beginning, everything went very slow. You had to think about each movement and so on. And now it's pretty much automated. That's because how you navigate a car and how you use it in everyday traffic has become an automated pathway in your brain. Tons of loads of networks, but automated is the fact. So there is a process which is called myelination. And I don't want to dive like deep into the neuroscience here. That's not like my goal. My goal is just to understand about rewarding. So when we have new neural pathways and the brain actually comes back in a little bit more relaxed state, in a resting state, that's when the brain replays that new firing. That happens in the hippocampus. That's not very important for you, but the thing is, our brain, to consolidate information when we learn something new, our brain needs rest. And we all remember as a child when we learn how to drive a bicycle, that very often the next day it was easier than the day before because we had rest overnight and our brain could like consolidate that new information. So myelin acts like, you can imagine myelin like the plastic around an electric cable. So basically what the myelin does when this myelination process happens in the brain, when the brain replays this firing again and again, which it actually does best when you rest. Um, it's like you have a good isolation around your electric cable. That means like the electricity doesn't like, it's not going somewhere where it shouldn't. It's direct, it's fast, it's like a very clear signal without any interference from the outside because it's isolated in the plastic tube. It's very simple image, but that's like we can imagine what that means. So when we create those highway neuronal networks in our brains, which get automated, they get myelinated because we want them to be fast, we want them to be easy, and we want them to be clear. So when we're training our horses now, and we have a moment where the horse figured out a solution to a task, and we say like, let's give the horse a break. We want the message, which is replayed in the brain, the information that the brain has to consolidate to create those new neuronal pathways. We want that message to be as clear as possible. There is anyhow tons of stimuli around us the whole time. So there will be noise around your horse. There will be, you can't stop nature from making sounds. There will be visual input. There will be stuff. But what we can avoid is to add even more stimuli. So for example, if I have the feeling, oh, my horse did well, I want to pet him immediately or caress or say, you did so well, or give a treat or whatever it is. Let's stick to touching as an example. You bring in tactile stimuli. So you fire more neurons in the body and in the brain at that moment where the brain has to figure out and consolidate this new information it had just fired. So actually, you kind of make the message less clear if you reward in the moment where the brain needs to go through that process. So to have the best learning experience, the best reward for the horse is the pause itself. It is the do not add more stimuli. Let the brain do its job. Let the brain consolidate the information, which it just was new and which fired new pathways, so that it's easy for the brain and for the horse to really have a clear learning experience. So I guess that's very obvious. The more interference, background noise in terms of stimuli you bring in, the less clear the message actually. So it will have an effect on how clear the learning progress is as well. So that is one point which I found very important to point out. After your horse had had that break, after your horse has had the time it needs, sure, you can go and caress or give a treat if you want, or say something nice or whatever it is. But it would be a pity to miss that moment where the brain really does its job of the new learning experience if we bring in too many stimuli as interference and make it more difficult actually for the brain to figure out what were the important messages we need, and we need to create the pathways for the future. A second thing which everyone talks about nowadays, especially as well in people, is dopamine. We all heard of dopamine addicts, like, we're scrolling our phones and so it's so rewarding to watch another reel, or we eat those nice things which make us feel good on very short term, or we watched this awesome series, and all these stimuli we have nowadays which actually create dopamine hits in our brain. Um, that's one way to get them from the outside. So we give ourselves, it's like, dopamine is known as the pleasure hormone. So by external things, we give ourselves dopamine hits because they feel good. It's a feel good thing. It's a reward thing. And it's as well a motivation hormone, it's called. I mean, it does a ton more of things, but like that's the things for which are important for this video. And if we think of what happens actually when we are in a learning situation, we have this moment where we're a little bit aroused, where we're stressed, where we need to figure out something, where our nervous system is like in a higher arousal state a little bit. And then we figure out something, we learn it. We're like, yeah, that's it. Now I got it. Now I found the solution. That's where the dopamine, the internal dopamine hit comes, and where we feel like, wow, I found the solution. This is where we feel rewarded, where we feel satisfied. So that's the same for our horse. They are like in a situation, they figure out something, let it be whatever, a trailer, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And the horse figures out a good solution. The moment the nervous system comes back down and the dopamine releases there, that's where they feel good about what they just did. And this is a feel good from the inside. It's they feel good inside because they produce that dopamine by their experience. It's not the dopamine by I'm being given an apple which tastes good, which gives me dopamine as well. But it's a different experience to have this reward internally than if you get that reward from the outside. And that plays a very, very big role in when we think of motivation, because it's the same for us. If we, what can I give you an example? Um, if I don't have the feeling I've done something very special, for example, let's say I've written an essay, but I know it's not whatever, it's not my essay. I steal half of it. Half of it was ChatGPT doing it. I don't know what. And now I like publish my essay and people are saying like, "Oh, that's so amazing. You did so well." But I know I didn't do it. I will not have, I will, yes, they might pat me and that might feel shortly good because I'm recognized and so on, but I will not have an internal dopamine output because I will not feel the satisfaction as if I would have done the work myself. That's for a human. And if we think of motivation, if I figured out something myself and I know I did it, then I am motivated for the next difficult thing to go there and say, hey, yes, I'm motivated to learn more because it felt so good that I did that work and I put in that effort. Um, and that's very different than when I'm rewarded from the outside and I do it for an outside reward, because what if that outside reward doesn't come anymore? Then I lose my motivation because it was an external motivation, not an internal one. So that's a very important thing as well to think about in the way how we choose to reward our horses. And that this internal reward system, it's built in them. It's their nature. It's our nature as well. But talking of horses, it's their nature. They have an internal reward system. So why not let them reward themselves and create motivation for learning by this? Let me check my notes if I say everything I want to say. Yeah. And a third topic, which is important to me, is the human part of it, like the question, why do we want to reward? What's my motivation for rewarding my horse? And that really comes down to how most of us, I will say most of us, um, have been wired since our childhood as well. We are really wired for external motivation, for external rewards as well. So it's like if you do well, you'll have a good grade. If you do this, I don't know. Even when I went to the dentist, when I did well as a child, I was given a bonbon later. I was like, I'm at the dentist. Why do I get a bonbon? But yeah, it motivated me more to come back again. So we kind of connect reward systems from the outside with we get attention, or it feels like, oh, affection towards me. So kind of I'm being loved somehow, you know? So often when we want to reward our horses and as well as humans, but let's stick to horses, we actually want to show our love doing that. So if I tell you how awesome you are, and if I pet you now, and if I give you a carrot and I don't know what, I show you my love with that. But the question for me is very often, is that really how horses perceive love? Because even for humans, that's not exactly what really makes us feel loved, seen, heard, felt, and so on. But for the horses, when you look at, because people then say, oh yeah, but isn't it a good reward if I scratch my horse on a spot he likes, for example? And let me put that differently. There are moments where doing that is the best thing you can do, and where it is creating bonding with your horse, where it is creating comfort and safety and so on. The question is just, is that moment a learning situation? Because if you look at horses in nature, or look at horses in a pasture, for example, let's say if they're all hanging around, everything is fine, we feel safe, nothing special is occurring. They're grazing, resting, scratching mane with a friend, having body contact, and so on. That's a wonderful moment to bond. That's a wonderful moment to be there, to create relationship, to be together, to feel good, but it's not a learning moment. So if you take, for example, the situation you have horses in a pasture and you put a new water bucket, which has a different shape, different color, whatever it is, or you put the water bucket in a different space or something, and all of a sudden the horses are like, oh, there's a water bucket. Let's figure this out. They're a little bit excited. Nervous system is a little bit in higher gear and so on. And then they figure out there's no problem. Aha, okay, there comes a release moment. That's not the moment where they will just stand there, stop and scratch mane. That's going to be later. So maybe this reward idea, with us wanting to show love and affection and attention and so on, maybe we should just be aware of the fact that that is a different moment to do that than when we are in an actual learning moment where we really want the brain to consolidate new information and to really be in that, and to consolidate actually what the new wiring, what has happened, and to create new neuronal pathways which the horses can like actually, which will shape their brain for the future and for future communication with them and us, um, that we really look at those things as two different things. Yeah. So I checked my notes again. I think I said everything I wanted to say for now. So I hope this brings some clarity. I'm curious about your thoughts, and I'm curious how you will look at rewarding your horse next time you work with them.